are none. So that brings us to the performance exceptions report. So Peter, if I can invite you to the table, and if there are any brief comments that you'd like to make or anything you'd like to highlight, and then we'll move to questions. Thank you.
Good morning. Here we are again. No, there are no real comments to make other than that we're reasonably consistent with last month. There have been a few changes around levels of service, but they're not actually decreases in what we've delivered. They're simply better data. And that shows that we've got a bit of a drop of about 5% on last month. That's based on what Audit and Risk Committee recommended, which is that if a target wasn't met last year, it doesn't automatically go green. There needs to be some evidence that we've actually lifted our game before we can claim it as a good forecast. So I guess the best way to view that is it's better to know that now than at the end of the year as a surprise. So the other changes that we've got, there are some in water supply and stormwater, and they're listed on the front page of the report. I'm not going to line by line every exception, but they're there for you to inquire about if you need to. And there are some corrective action ones, water supply, parks, strategic planning, where focus on the yellows is really a better investment of time than dealing with stuff that's already gone by. Now the details of those exceptions are in the attachment, and obviously we go through that later. Just moving quickly through the report, watch list is a big improvement on previous years, so we haven't opened so strongly in the past as we have this time. Both watch list projects and major cycleways are high and continuing to climb up around the 86-87% mark for both of them early in the year. There are some exceptions, as there always are, and they're there. They show the change from the original baseline to the current baseline to the current forecast. Now, Ruth's report covers these in much more detail. This is meant to be a high-level view against performance rather than a detailed project-by-project view. So they're the two main points out of the performance report. The exception details are attached. There's normally some questions on those. If I can answer quickly, I will, but if it's a detailed question, I'd prefer, in keeping with instructions from the chair, to take that away and come back to you rather than delay the meeting.
All right, thank you. And again, it's worth noting, as I think we did last time, that this is an exceptions report. So what we're reporting here is those levels of service which are not been met by exception. There are many, many levels of service which are being met, which obviously wouldn't form part of this report because they're not exceptions in the way that this is an exceptions report. So let's, so Peter, thank you for that. Let's now move to any questions. Sam.
Thanks, Peter, and it might be a detailed one, so we could even potentially take it offline. It's just on page 26, around the regulatory compliance of building services stuff. I just didn't quite understand that. So it says the measure is around providing general advice and response, the targets to meet agreed timeframes and requirements, and then the actual just says we've overspent in the area and that we'll need to look at it because of high demand. But one of the remedial actions might be to close down the downstairs counter. So I just wondered, and maybe it's something we can take offline with Leone, but it didn't make sense when the demand's going up that one of the actions would be to sort of reduce the public inquiries.
I don't have the details of that at my fingertips, so I think that is a Leone. What we'll do is we'll get a report back on what's under that, okay, and bring it back to you.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yep, perfect. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yanni.
Several questions. On page 28, Parks Heritage, I see that we our residents' satisfaction, our target's 90% and we're at 65. You talk about, or the report talks about taking in-house maintenance and not being confident that we can raise the satisfaction level. Have we thought about a freeze on accepting new works until we get on top of the satisfaction? Because I'm quite surprised to see this here when just a few weeks ago we also had a report to take on more maintenance costs for new art when we don't seem to be able to satisfactorily look after our existing ones. So I'm just wondering how the organisation considers those things together.
I'll have to go back to Andrew. That's so operational. I don't know the answer, but Andrew will.
Just on my next question was around the water supply targets. We did previously have one, I think, where that it was measured the response time for urgent and non-urgent. So within 24 hours if it was urgent, within 3 days for non-urgent. But I don't see that in here, and I wasn't quite sure why, but we do see a number of other ones for water around people being satisfied with the responsiveness of the service, and that's on page 21.
Yep.
So I also see that one of our targets is around people are using more water than what we would have liked, so we're failing on that target as well. So my question really is, when can we be advised around that level of service that I thought we were failing on the response times? And what resource do you need to meet that target so that we reduce the amount of water that's been wasted?
If it isn't here, it will be because it's been forecast as successful. So that's one thing. It doesn't mean that the level of service is gone. It just means that it's not an exception. It's not being flagged as off track. So I'll go back and confirm that that's the case, that that target still exists and that it was flagged green. If it's green, it's part of that overwhelming green donut you see on the front page, which is they're not in front of you because they're okay, they're on track. As for the water consumption, I'm moving into Helen's space, but she'll probably throw a chair at me if I get it wrong. We had a dry winter and a dry spring. It may well be that it's simply a product of the climate this year that we've got more consumption. Is that right, Helen?
Yeah, there's two drivers for the consumption. One is exactly right. We're experiencing a dry year, and already we have high demand on our system, higher than we have in the last 5 years for this time of year. And the second part of that is the high leakage rate that we're experiencing out of our water supply system. So both of those things are driving up consumption.
Sorry, can someone just clarify if we're meeting that level of service target in terms of response times to fix water leaks?
We're doing some work on that, so we're doing some work on the information that we're getting out of our hybrid system and comparing that with the information that we're getting directly from our contractors to make sure that we've got the correct information to bring back to you.
I mean, I think this has been raised about 2 months in a row. When are we likely to get an understanding of that?
So we've got a Three Waters Infrastructure Environment Committee meeting on the 25th, and we'll bring it to that meeting.
Will that give us enough time to allocate resource if we need to fix the problem, if there's problems?
Are you now asking LTP questions?
No, I just want to get on top of the water leaks issue.
So there's a report coming to Pauline's committee, the next meeting of Pauline's committee. That's great. So what I'm hearing is that report will answer some of the matters that Yanni is raising. So that's in train and it will be reported. That's great. So Yanni, can you be a little bit more specific around your last question?
So last year we had a similar issue with fixing water leaks. We got a very detailed memorandum back, which was really good, which showed clearly the scale of the problem and had remedial actions with our contractor to get on top of it, right? Which was really insightful, which basically said we had X amount of complaints. We weren't going to meet our levels of service within the time frame that we'd set, so we'd extended the time frames and we'd focused additional resource through the weekends, for example, from our contractor.
Yep.
I just can't quite understand, given that this has happened maybe, I think it was about 2 months ago, maybe not quite as long ago, or maybe a little bit longer, where we were told that we weren't meeting that target, but we don't have any information as to how bad the problem is and what's required to fix it.
So will that all be contained in the report that's coming to the next meeting of Pauline's committee?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. So there's a pathway to getting this resolved.
2 weeks.
And then, obviously, any changes that need to be made for the LTP...
Sorry, it's not an LTP issue. It's a current financial issue.
Yeah, no, agreed.
Well, I don't see how we can expect people to save water and conserve water when they're reporting leaks and they're not getting them fixed in a timely manner.
So in 2 weeks, there's a report coming to the appropriate committee, which on the back of that report, depending what the report says, any actions which need to be taken can follow, some of which may need to be immediate if there's an urgent situation, some of which might be around resourcing, which would then feed into LTP decision making, and any other matters that we may not think about here, but we may become aware of when that report lands.
Okay.
So I think we've got a pathway to address the issue that you're raising, and I also think we've got a pathway to quantify the issue that we're raising, because certainly one of the matters is what is the problem that we're looking at, and is it as big a problem as the way that it's been reflected or described? And I'm assuming, Helen, that the report will quantify the any problem and the issues that we're dealing with here, and possibly even recommend a pathway to resolve any matters that the report points out.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the other thing we discussed is having visibility on our website so that when people ring up or contact the call centre or put in CSRs, they can see the scale of the problem and understand, rather than put in job after job after job, told it's happening or not given a time frame, so people can actually understand the challenge of what we've got in terms of this particular
Yeah,
one.
so let's anticipate that
Thanks.
discussion alongside the report when it comes to Pauline's committee.
Thank you.
All right, Helen, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Sarah. Okay, thank you. Pauline.
Before you left, just on that water consumption. So for July, August, September, quite a lot higher than what the average is per day. But how do those numbers for July, August, September relate to the usage in the peak time in summer?
So they don't yet. So the water use will continue to increase as we go into
So
the
let's
summer.
say last year's figure. Do you remember what it was up at?
No, not off the top of my head, but
I mean, is that close to the summer usage or not?
it's no. So the summer usage will go a lot higher again,
higher.
but it's significantly higher than we usually use through the winter months because of the very dry conditions.
Yep, okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, any further questions? Peter.
I just have a point of clarification. On the front page, we've got some ambers that require corrective action, and one of them is around water safety plans. On face value, you'd read that as an exception. I'd just like to point out that if you read the explanation, it's quite a technicality, that's the reason why that's there. We haven't actually failed in that space at all. I don't know if you want to expand on that, but the provision of water safety plans for all water supply zones is not an exception because we haven't done them. Sorry, or maybe the point's a little too arcane.
The water safety plans issues is also all covered in the Three Waters Infrastructure and Environment Committee report.
Yep.
So, and most councillors are very familiar with those and the timetable for them.
I guess the point is that it appears as a single line exception on the front page, but the detailed explanation that follows shows that it's a technicality that it's there for, rather than a substantive reason.
Yeah, sure. And thank you for pointing that out. That's great. Any further questions? All right, so we've got a recommendation to receive the information provided in the report, which I'm happy to move. Do I have a seconder? Sam? Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you. So now moving to the